Yeah, it said EA announces agreement to be acquired by PIF, Silver Lake, and Affinity Partners for $55 billion. Yeah, one of these is the PIF, which is Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, which means that the government itself is a part-time or part owner of EA now, which means part of the earnings of EA or whatever agreement they have go to the Saudi Arabian government, which is wild. It's an investment from the Saudi Arabian government, effectively, and they purchased a portion of it. And then Silver Lake and Jared Kushner's Affinity Partners are the rest. I don't know what percentage is for each one of those parties, but like I haven't seen a government acquisition of a game studio before. I've never seen that, like at all. So, right? Like what does that even mean? I have no freaking idea. Rip EA? Like any of you guys liked EA before this? Let's be honest for 5 seconds. Isn't it just Tencent? Yeah, but everything in China is owned by the Chinese government, right? So like with that, they already owned it. This is an acquisition by a government, which I haven't really seen. Like, that's new. They had a 9.9% stake beforehand already? Okay. Yeah, if that was the case, then cool. If they already had a nearly 10% stake in EA, it's a pretty big deal. A government acquisition can stifle creativity. If they already owned 9.9% of the studio before that, I'd be interested to see if they even change anything. Silver Lake is also funded by the Saudi Arabian government? Yeah, I kind of want to see, like, how much of this even matters, right? Because let's be honest, right? Let's be real for a second here. The Saudi Arabian government likely doesn't want to change anything because then they lose their investment, right? Like, let's be completely real with this. Let's take this as a business acquisition. If the Saudi Arabian government has purchased this for $55 billion, do they actually want to change things or do they just want money? And the answer is they probably want money, right? So if we're really worried about them going from a 9.9% stake to now having a large amount of ownership, I don't think they want to functionally change the company. I think it is more likely they want to just make more money off of their original investment they already had, right? There's a very specific thing they're after. Do we know that for sure, or is that we believe that's the case? Why buy EA? Makes a shitload of money. You may not like it, but it's a lot of money. As Hades Stew so far, fantastic game. Yeah, like I don't want to deal in wishy-washies on this. I want to deal in absolutes that we know. What I know right now is this is a business acquisition by a government, which is weird, and I'm waiting to see how that turns out. Yeah. They're doing this in sports, too. And one of the Saudi princes is a huge gamer. That is true, yes. Or like BioWare, but they get pushed around by EA a lot. It's true. It is a big push, but basically the way that I look at this is I don't know if it's necessarily a bad thing, dude. I really don't. Like, if we look at EA for a long time now, they're not really well-loved, are they? They really aren't. Like, EA has been absolutely reviled by most people for a long time. Do I think that the Saudi Arabian government is going to do good things there? I have no idea. Business-wise, they made a good decision purchasing it. Like, it makes a shitload of money. Like, let's go look at EA's total earnings last year. Let's see. Their net revenue last year was $7.463 billion. That is an awesome acquisition to be taking for $55 billion. Like, 100%. That's crazy. And if their net income overall, their net revenue was 7.463. Their net income was 1.042 billion, right? So that's after expenses. My guess, government's going to go in, Saudi Arabian government. They're going to have advisors. They're probably going to cut down on weird waste and shit that's all over there, stuff that EA is doing that doesn't work, which, to be honest with you, their reputation's not all that good, right? And then putting money into things that do work because they want to get a return on investment. That's the thing that I'm going to look at it for. I know a lot of people are probably going to be like, oh no, they're going to change the culture of EA. We didn't like the culture of EA before this. I don't know anyone who did. We kind of shit on EA every day. I'm interested to see two things that happen. One, how do they change the business if they do it all? And two, how do they change the culture if they do it all? And by culture, I mean the content of the games. Because if it's part-time owned by Saudi Arabian government, they have a very different outlook about what is allowed in media. Does that extend down into the games now or not? Don't know. And I know some people will say it's absolutely going to happen, but we don't know that's going to happen. We just know that it's an acquisition for a business reason for now. Is it weird? Absolutely. Yeah. Also, how allowed is gambling in video games in Saudi Arabia? How is EA going to have loot boxes, right? If Saudi Arabia owns EA now, how is EA going to be allowed to have loot boxes? They're not allowed in Saudi Arabia, but now the company is owned by the Saudi Arabian government. Do they just, it's fine if you gamble in other countries. Is that allowed? Is that a thing? Because I know it's like a belief structure thing. You know what I mean? If the government blesses it, it'll be allowed. That's interesting. That's really interesting. See, this is one of the things that's really interesting is this causes problems for EA as a business. This causes problems for the Saudi Arabian government because they have to resolve situations like that. Like, do we allow loot boxes? The government owns the company. Is that allowed? Culturally, it's not allowed in Saudi Arabia, but that's a global company. That means that the Saudi Arabian government would be profiting off of gambling in other countries, which I don't know if they do or not already, right? So like this is the stuff I'm interested in seeing it get resolved. That's why I'm like, I don't really think that's too much of a bad thing. You know, it's more of a, how does this play out? The answer is it could be really bad. It could be, right? But maybe it isn't. Just gotta wait. I'm gonna wait and see. Because it's an interesting situation because there's a lot of, I guess, chance for change. Does that make sense? Both good and bad. And I'm gonna wait and see. You're gonna see a lot more censorship. That is one option. That could be true, Lionblood, because we know that in Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of restriction on certain types of speech. But does that extend to the global business? Because in Saudi Arabia, you're also not allowed to gamble. But does that extend to the global business? See where I'm going with that? How much of that belief inside of Saudi Arabia actually extends to the global version of this business? Because EA is absolutely bound to loot boxes, and that is gambling. Do you want to support that? You were supporting them before when the Saudi Arabian government owned 9.9% of the business, so what's changed for you now? And if you want to talk about human rights violations specifically with the Saudi Arabian government, then why are you watching Twitch? Because Amazon has been accused of the same things and they own Twitch. It's easy to stand on a pedestal for your ideals when it comes to a company, but when we're talking about global business, everything gets real muddy real fast, man. Real fast. That's why I'm waiting to see. You got to be honest with yourself about that. You could have a line that you don't say anyone can cross, but be honest about the connections that exist between these businesses. Silver Lake and Affinity Partners will be active owners. How active are we talking, though? It's not on the same level. Still happens. There's no ethical consumption in capitalism. Ugh. Things get money in between two people, let alone an entire business. Yeah, that's why I'm waiting to see what actually happens here. I think it's important to understand why they don't like gambling. Shit is dangerous, and I respect the danger. I think it's more important to find out how the business actually changes. I think that's the bigger thing to me is, does this actually extend to anything? What do you think will happen to EA employees around the world? Don't know. Because does the business change? Like I said, if the Saudi Arabian government doesn't allow gambling, how is EA going to survive? They won't. Which means that they're likely not going to change the gambling inside of games in the form of loot boxes on a global basis. You could say the same thing about censorship inside of Saudi Arabia. I don't know what's going to happen there. And for me, I'm more interested to find out what happens rather than sit there in fear and doom and gloom and, oh my God, everything is going to go to shit and everything's going to go wrong. It's so easy to fall into that trap and absolutely know the bad thing is going to happen, but I don't know the bad thing is going to happen. I can have assumptions, but those assumptions are worthless right now because we've never seen this happen before. They even buying enough stock to be able to force any changes? Oh, they're buying the whole company. It's a full acquisition. Wouldn't they just allow operation as is outside Saudi Arabia? From the business standpoint, that's the smartest thing to do, Winky. 100%. So, like, if you were the Saudi Arabian government, you really wanted to change the way that things worked. If you buy a company for $55 billion, you're basically saying, hey, that thing over there works. What if I just threw away $55 billion for fun and then just got rid of it? And then I just didn't get any money back. That makes no sense, especially not from Saudi Arabia. They're usually pretty shrewd when it comes to business. You wonder what portion of money the FIFA brings in for the total revenue? Let's find out. FIFA total earnings. And FIFA, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe FIFA is completely reliant on loot boxes. Jesus Christ. So for 2024... Okay, so FIFA only made $500 million last year, and EA made $7.6 billion last year. So FIFA's not even their largest amount, like, by a lot. I wonder where all of their money is coming from. Largest earner for EA. What do we got here? What is their largest earner? It looks like it's almost entirely their EA Sports lineup, but it's not just FIFA. It's a lot of sports lineup shit. EA is almost entirely their sports stuff. Yeah, Madden, too. Madden, all of the EA Sports, everything. Yep. Madden NFL, EA Sports FC. Yeah, it's pretty much all that. Keep getting EA Sports ads here on Twitch. It's all of that. There's the NBA games too. Here's the other thing too. What happens to the rights for portraying all those characters who are real people in sports? Okay, so here's the couple of questions that I have, right? What happens to EA's culture? Does it change external to Saudi Arabia in the rest of the world? 2, what happens to EA's monetization external to the rest of Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia doesn't allow gambling and loot boxes are gambling. 3, what happens to the rights, to the likenesses of all of those sports figures? Because now they own all the games, and the licenses to those figures are now in the games. See where all that goes? That's a wild amount of questions, right? Yeah, these are all the speculations. I'm not worried about speculation. These are the questions I want to ask. And I'm going to put it up on Twitter. Yeah, this is wild. Yeah, 1, with Saudi Arabia having a hard stance against gambling, what happens to loot box monetization in EA games in regions outside of SA? 2, I understand your concerns. Some point you want to speak out. Yeah, no, we don't allow... I know there's going to be a lot of people that make political grandstanding on different stuff, but, like, I don't give a shit about that. I care more about what's happening here for business-related stuff, because that's going to change that. Yeah. Can you have a link one more time? I'm going to go to the AP article. AP, EA purchase. CEO is staying on. Not to be acquired. Do we have the AP article? You guys can send that. I give the AP News article. I'm grabbing that. Video game Electronic Arts to be acquired for $52.5 billion. So it's 52.5, not 55. Yeah, so one, with Saudi Arabia having a hard stance against gambling, what happens to loot box monetization in EA games in regions outside of Saudi Arabia? What happens to licensing rights to each sports personality inside of the EA Sports lineup? And will this cause renegotiations? Those rights. And then, what was the last one? I had another question there. I can't remember what it was. If your paycheck relies on a certain company, you're unlikely to stand up to that company. I've done it before. Some people will. Does that mean piñatas are banned in Saudi Arabia? Maybe. Will EA wear wigs? That's a good one. There was another question I had. I can't remember what it was. Yeah, that's the other thing, too, is I'm wondering if it would cause a renegotiation for those rights, right? That's a big one. I think likeness is handled by the player's agents. It could be, but also, is there in that contract between those individuals for rights, right? Between EA and those individuals or their agencies. Is there a clause that those rights can be transferred? Because not all rights can be transferred. And did EA think ahead and actually get those rights inside of that contract to say that the rights were transferable? Because that's important. And does it count as a transfer if the company is acquired? And that's the other thing I don't know, right? They only have the rights for the sport. They're not all of EA for that sport. Well, they have likenesses of certain individuals within that sport. It's just a purchase of the shares. The rights are owned by the company, not the shareholders. While true, you have a majority ownership there. Will this open up for renegotiation because of this? Because now there are going to be some players that go, I don't want to be associated with the Saudi Arabian government. They will be. And then their agency will be like, hey, this is actually bad for the image of my player. We need to renegotiate now? See where that goes very quickly? Because there's even a number of people in chat that don't like this acquisition, which means there's going to be players that don't like that acquisition either, and now their likeness is inside of a game that is majority held by Saudi Arabian government. This is why that matters, right? I don't think the individual players actually have the choice. Their agents might, though. The agencies that run them may have that choice. And we don't know if they sold their likeness in perpetuity, Winky. We know that they sold their license. The license to their likeness in some capacity. We don't know anything outside of that. Yeah. They don't know their likeness with respect to the sport and the agency does. We don't know the agreement that they had with EA, though. Usually those licenses are for a certain number of years, and sometimes they will have caveats of like major business ownership changes or damage to like their public perception and everything like that. There's a lot of different kind of caveats that can happen inside of those contracts. Yeah, it's wild, actually. Okay, so we have Saudi Arabian government having a hard stance against gambling. What happens to loot box monetization in EA games? What happens to licensing rights? Will this acquisition change the public messaging or the content of the games outside of the Saudi Arabian, outside of SA? Yeah, I think it's the third one. Yeah, so really what we want to know is, with the Saudi Arabia having a hard stance against gambling, what happens to loot box monetization in EA games in regions outside of Saudi Arabia? What happens to licensing rights to each sports personality inside of the EA Sports lineup? And will this cause renegotiations for those rights? And will this acquisition change the content of the games outside of Saudi Arabia? It's negotiated with the players' union. While it may be negotiated with the players' union, the content of that contract is what matters the most. That's the thing that matters. I'm Saudi. Believe me, with time they'll allow gambling. My guess is that they're going to allow gambling automatically. Because think about it this way, right? If you're in Saudi Arabia, I know that you guys don't allow gambling there. But what happens to these games that are primarily monetized through loot boxes that are gambling, right? Because they are. And now the Saudi Arabian government owns a commanding share of EA, which means the Saudi Arabian government is profiting off of gambling in regions outside of Saudi Arabia. That poses a bit of a challenge there. All right, so let's see. With the acquisition of EA by Saudi Arabian government, I'm really just interested in three questions. One, with Saudi Arabia having a hard stance against gambling, what happens to loot box monetization in EA games in regions outside of Saudi Arabia? Two, what happens to licensing rights to each sports personality inside of EA Sports lineup, and will this cause renegotiations for those rights? Because that could completely devastate their entire sports lineup. Three, will this acquisition change the content of the games outside of SA in terms of messaging and story is really what matters there to me. Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing. And I said, at the end of it, I said, I'm interested in seeing how this all plays out. Don't really want to speculate on what will happen. I can make assumptions, but I'm more interested in if the company's direction even changes outside of Saudi Arabia. Because to be real with you, it's not a good thing to change that company dynamic entirely if the machine is already working. You just want to soak up money. Yeah, I said, I'm interested in seeing how this all plays out and don't really want to speculate on what will happen. I can make assumptions, but I'm more interested if the company's direction even changes outside of Saudi Arabia. It's generally not a good business decision to change the direction of a large earner, even if I don't like EA's business practices. Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. Boop, put on the internet. Because that's wild, dude. That's a really huge purchase. SA's been pushing for sporting events for years. World Cup, F1 races, WWE events. Oh, I know. No, they're super into sports, man. They're like a really, really big sports thing. Who hasn't complained about EA weird shit? I don't like EA. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I haven't liked EA's direction in years, man. They just keep reproducing the same sports game over and over and over again and just filling it with monetization. I think they're like the poster child for why loot boxes are wrong. So now I'm like, what happens now? I don't know. I have no idea.